Welcome to Inclusion Influencers, brought to you by the National Alliance for Accessible Golf. I'm Dave Barton, Executive Director of the Alliance. Our goal with these interviews is to highlight the people and organizations in the game of golf that are making a difference in the lives of individuals with disabilities. This includes golfers out there leading the way by showing others what is possible, organizations that dedicate resources and facilities to bring people into the game, and others that support, educate, inform, and perhaps inspire you to learn more and get yourself and others involved. Golf is truly a game for all abilities. Our guest today is Mark Taylor, PGA. Mark is a fellow PGA of Great Britain and Ireland professional and a member of the PGA of Germany. He is also an RNA and International Golf Federation golf development consultant. He's been in the PGA since 1996, coaching and was the head professional at East Switzerland Golf Club. Returning to the UK, he began as development officer for England Golf and has tutored and trained hundreds of professionals in all aspects of golf development. Mark, I believe you arrived at the EDGA in 2017 as their head of development, as we mentioned, and you continue to train and create more coaches qualified to work with golfers with disabilities, and you're involved with at least 26 international member countries in the process. Welcome to the show, Mark. I think I've got everything in your resume, except I might have missed a World Top 100 UK coach in there somewhere as well, right? Good morning, Mark. Glad to have you.
Good morning, Dave. Yeah, it's currently afternoon here in rainy UK, but thanks for the wise words of yeah. I think you've got everything there. I think somewhere along the line I was a World Top 100 UK golf coach, if that's an accolade of any sort. I think some things have maybe changed there, as I was a member of the PGA of Germany. However, I'm more of an affiliate member of them now, and I think the background there is pretty solid. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Well, we appreciate it. I'll definitely get my time zones figured out. By the end of this call, I will know that you are 5 hours away from me, and I will get locked down on that. So we're going to touch on a few things today, especially about the EDGA. A lot of people do know about it, but I think a lot more people need to learn more about the amazing things that y'all are doing. Obviously, we've been able to work with you a few things, or at least help support some of your efforts by sharing some of your amazing information, like learning from the edges, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll also touch on your You Can campaign, which you just launched towards the end. But I understand the EDGA just had their 25th anniversary. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. The EDGA was founded in the year 2000. So yeah, a lot of celebration going on, just to really highlight some of the things that have happened and worked over those last 25 years, getting more people to play our wonderful game.
Yeah, well, what was the catalyst? Like for our organization, we're an education advocacy organization. We don't run a lot of competitions and programs like your organization is involved in. More of a resource center, I guess, would be the way to describe what we do right now. But what was the kind of the catalyst for the creation of your organization? Around 2000.
Well, if we look back at 2000, Dave, I think golf for the disabled was in a slightly different space. 25 years ago, 25 years sounds a long time ago, and it actually is. And the world has changed considerably in that disability space since then. I mean, anyone under the age of 33 years old these days doesn't know a year without an International Day of the Disabled. So that just shows slightly how things have changed from in those 20 years and 25 years. But to really answer your question there, I think the reason that EDGA or the EDGA was formed in 2000 was it was to offer an alternate pathway for people with functional differences or disabilities, limitations or impairments, however we want to phrase that, to get together and share some experience, play some golf, and really start a sort of a tournament pathway alternate to the mainstream pathway, that they could travel, meet like-minded people with lived experience, and get started. And probably the reason that was done in 2000 is because, quite simply, in 2000 nobody else was doing anything. So the gentleman Peter Van Duyn, who we are forever indebted to, who founded the EDGA, he started up these small competitions, started to bring in a few more people around. They had what was called a medical pass, I believe, in those days, and started to run sort of an eligibility process that allowed people to play and compete on this alternate pathway. So I was with Peter actually a couple of weeks ago in Portugal at our 25th anniversary celebrations, and he's a great man. And marrying his wife, it was great to see them there. And without them, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. So we are very indebted to Peter and his great work back in 2000.
Yeah, I'll ask you one quick follow-up on that. Here in the States, of course, we have, 1990 had an Americans with Disabilities Act, which was written, and there's also a range of associated civil rights legislation about golf and access and stuff like that. A little bit familiar with Canada. They've got, provinces, and some of them have these kind of laws. Obviously, Europe is a broad, expansive area. And I guess I suspect that maybe is it safe to say some countries kind of really get it, some are kind of coming along board. I mean, as far as legislation and laws, do you have to kind of work around those a little bit to try to convince people this is the right thing to do, and et cetera?
Yeah, having legislation on our side certainly helps because, in the golf industry and the golf federations that we've historically worked with, who are the governing bodies of the sport in these countries, which are currently, we're currently working alongside those 50 member federations and probably a wider reach of around 140 affiliates of the R&A who we work alongside as well. But every country is quite rightly different. Some are more advanced. The more in Europe we get towards the sort of Scandinavian countries, they're way ahead with this. And, the more we get to the lesser developed countries in the golf space, certainly in the golf industry, there are certainly more hurdles to jump. However, they also have a wide opportunity to understand that this is a potential niche market for them, to encourage that 15% of the population to who live with disabilities to try and take up our wonderful game for the many health benefits that it could offer. So I think, yeah, there's things to be done. Some countries are good. Some countries are. I live in the UK, so we've had that legislation in place. Golf facilities have to be accessible or need to be working towards that. But these allow us to show some very good case studies to the emerging countries, I would call them, of what they have to work towards. I think that's what the EDGA does quite well in its sort of 8-stage program, where it helps federations, emerging countries, existing countries working in this space to understand some of the best practice in how to do this.
Yeah, the fantastic. That's super informative and good to know. So we kind of got right into some pretty good questions, but I want to get back to, one of the more important questions I like to speak with folks about when I start with them is kind of what drove you, personally, on this path that you've been on for a while, related to working with individuals with disabilities, and of course, just, inspiring, so many other folks to get involved.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been a golf professional and a golf coach for, I think it's coming up to 34, maybe even 35 years, showing my age there, Dave. But after qualifying, I was quite lucky to qualify quite well in the PGA of GBNI, and I moved overseas. I wanted to learn a different language. I wanted to get into the coaching. I thought I knew everything about coaching, and very quickly found out that I didn't at the ripe old age of 21 and 22. So I spent a lot of time in coaching across all segments of coaching, from introducing new people to the game in a new country such as Switzerland. As you mentioned, I worked there for 11 years and run various golf academies, and that was a new country to the game. So that was interesting. I then worked in performance with some very good golfers and across England golf. When I returned in 2008 back to home, back to the UK. And really, I wanted to do, so I went back to university. I did some more studies. I wanted to reinvent myself as a golf coach. I'd sort of had enough of golf coaching by then, doing, it to that extent, as I'm sure you're familiar with. I wanted to find something different to do, something really that challenged me. And I was fortunate in 2008 to find, to start to get some work in schools local to where my golf academy was based here in the UK. And there weren't many people working with children with special educational needs and disability, as the acronym is SEND over here. I'm sure it's slightly different in the US, but so I started working with these children with neurodivergent needs, physical disabilities, and I thought, you know what, this is really challenging, and I really enjoy this. And I then started to research who could help me to develop that a little more. And guess what? In 2008, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. So I continued to battle through it, and I was doing some work alongside Dr. Tony Bennett in the R&A and the Confederation of Professional Golf. I think it was called the PGAs of Europe back then, who were involved in coach education. So I was a development consultant in those organizations. So in 2017, Dr. Bennett brought me over to EDGA, knowing I'd had some history in this, and I tutored this for the PGA of GBNI and the inclusive element of coaching people with different functions. And he brought me over to have a look at the EDGA training provision and any gaps in that, and sort of develop a training program to help assist, volunteer coaches, professional coaches, and just right across the whole workforce, which I'm still very lucky to be involved in. And I think the challenge of coaching players with different function has certainly been one of the most learn rich areas that I've ever worked in golf. So I'm very fortunate to be able to speak about that and hopefully develop these education models and resources further. And some of the stuff that you've got is fantastic as well. So we're starting to get a footprint across the globe with this.
Yeah, I teach a little bit still with PGA Hope, but not nearly at your level. And I think it's really interesting that especially I'd say younger coaches, and I was not a full-time professional coach. I tried it for a couple of years, but being late to the golf game like I was like, I knew I was never really going to have probably the street credit and the desire to go down that path as a second career. But, I say sometimes we get really focused on, the moving parts of the body, which is important. And when you're teaching golf, how can somebody move regardless of what their ability is? But, especially with neurodivergent, as you said, intellectual disabilities, I mean, sensory communications, and how you communicate with a student are just incredibly important to the whole process, because you can have all the knowledge in the world about the science of the swing and some of these things, which is certainly a prerequisite to be a really good coach. But if you can't communicate with the student and they can't understand or you can't figure that out, it's going to be a challenge for sure, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to speak about learning from the edges, and really, as its title dictates, there is we're taking extreme functional limitation to help coaches understand how people move, how people play, and if we take the world number one and world number two in golf, they move and swing the golf club totally different because they have functional differences, and all we're doing is using the edges of functional limitation to help coaches understand. Probably in the middle there, in the general population that they're coaching, there is probably a lot of learnings in understanding how these extreme functional limitations play and helping them, better serve the general population that they're coaching. So, yeah, there's lots in that, and I think you're quite right. To be a good coach, you have to be. Let's call it the C concept: a good communicator, a chameleon as well, taking on these different personas and responsibilities inside a golf lesson or a golf coaching session. So I think communication is right up there. And if you're communicating to somebody with a sensory limitation, albeit, visual, hearing, or even neurodivergent, we have to communicate in a different way. And for the most part, we're quite lucky that golf coaches are good communicators, but I think this is another way to make them even better.
Yep, absolutely. So some of these numbers may be, I think, pretty accurate, but working with over 50 national federations, 12 professional golf associations, a lot of tournaments annually, 120 or more. You travel a ton, obviously, I believe. What do most of the conversations with these organizations and the work that you do with them revolve around? I mean, you're responsible for content and construction, I believe, of all the coach education resources for EDGA, virtual and physical, and these pathways for players with disabilities to get into the game. So that probably encapsulated a big overview of what you do, but really, where do you find most of your time as far as what you're talking about going to?
Yeah, so you're quite right. I mean, we work currently with member federations across 50 countries globally. They stretch right from Iceland in the north right the way down to New Zealand in the southern hemisphere, and pretty much everywhere in between. And the EDGA does have different responsibilities there and different resources available to these federations. The first being is that we need to give them an overview of golf for the disabled and this space and the industry benefits of this. And that really fits in with our 8 stage program, which isn't something that I'm directly involved in, but this would be a sort of a questionnaire form that federations would complete, and we would then get an overview of where they are, what they're doing, what they could do better, what they're doing well, and give them some guidelines. And that's run in affiliation with the RNA as well across their affiliates globally. So we have a lot of new emerging countries coming through that program who want to know more about this space. And more to the point, I think inside that, an element of those 8 stages would be coach education. And when it comes to coach education, well, that's my remit and my team's remit to deliver that globally. And we have, as you well know, you host a few of them, online resources. Because of our reach, we need those online resources to get to the countries that we need to get to. Sometimes it's difficult to travel. You alluded that I do travel a lot. I actually completed my last trip only last week to Belgium. So it's nice to be at home for a few weeks before I'm over to the States, actually coming your way, hopefully in January, as we've talked about. Yeah, we do travel a lot. So we're trying to create these online resources that gives a bit more reach and give coaches and volunteers, not necessarily always coaches, but even the rehabilitation centers, the occupational therapists, some of the training, these introducers that we can get to help them get the golf specific skill set or skill stack that they need to drive participation into our game, and also, servicing the existing players. So we have a lot of travel around those member federations, and a lot of new members coming in that want our support and our help, and then also sort of retrofitting the existing coaches that need some more support around how to coach players with disability limitations and different functional impairments. So it's quite a wide remit, but most of the conversations really are in establishing where either that PGA is of that country, who are the workforce education providers. We try and work hand in hand with the federation, or have done to this point, to help them understand that we're trying to align those to work together, because they both have an interest in growing the game, not just the workforce education providers as the PGAs, but also the federation. And we are currently working, we have our educational programming, which is our coach education framework, embedded into those 12 PGAs globally. And that gives us a little bit more of a head start, whereas those trainee golf professionals coming through that program in those countries will have an opportunity to work alongside the learning outcomes of coaching players with different functions, which previously wasn't a thing. So we've got to 12 PGAs. We're continuing to grow that, and hopefully then that will allow the EDGA and myself sort of to disappear slightly when the people responsible for driving these education programs in the countries pick that up and do it. So we are making progress there, but that's sort of an overview of a lot of things we do. A big part of my work as well at the moment is looking at research and researching new products and new equipment gaps that players with disabilities may have. Because when I analyze that market, there are some barriers to participation that we needed to address, and we're working quite closely, to try and address those and make a difference on those.
Yeah, very well said there, especially on the equipment side. Well, you've dropped his name a couple times here, but I have to have a real quick shout out here to uh, EDGA President Dr. Tony Bennett. I actually met him very briefly, which he probably would not remember because it was on the porch in about a 30-second drive by in Pinehurst at one of the early adaptive opens. But and I'm quite confident I probably did not make a lasting impression on him. But both you and Dr. Bennett have been great with our organization on a few matters, which we're extremely appreciative of, because you've got some great experience in this space, and to see where we've got some commonality and how we can help with whatever y'all are doing, vice versa. It makes us keeps us very motivated. Great example of one of those programs is you're learning from the Edges program, and you've been kind enough to let us share that program on your behalf on our education hub in the States. I will get on my soapbox here a little bit. I, the fact that y'all share your information so willingly and freely of how to get people in the game and help make coaches better is very, very cool. And I think it's extremely important. I mean, sometimes organizations that are in this line of work can get very protective of some of their material. And on some level, I understand that, but also It's like it's all about developing people. I think sometimes, regardless of what their initials behind their name may be, whatever that may be, to get more people understanding what is going on. I wanted us to talk a little bit of LFTE, if you can kind of tee that one up a little bit, because again, in my limited coaching experience compared to you, and I first started around 2007 or so, 2008 with the veteran program in the Maryland area. Is where I got my first taste of working with individuals with some significant mobility challenges. We'll just leave it at that. And I've loved it ever since. And that particular LFTE introduction manual that got LFTE guidance is literally one of the best things I've ever seen. The videos that are in there, the explanations, the drills that coaches can do to develop their skills. So I've like to hear just a little bit about that, but how's that program going for you? Because again, I think it's amazing. It goes way beyond the introduction that we've just kind of teed up, on our platform for y'all. But let's talk about LFT a little bit.
Yeah, so LFT, or learning from the edges, is it was developed by three people. Dr. Tony Bennett, who you've alluded to, who is a fantastic coach, educator, and a master professional in his own right. So, we were very lucky to have his insight to that. And Dr. Kyle Philpotts, who was the director of education for the PGA of GBNI for many years. So it wasn't just me taking the responsibility for that. We had two good minds and me alongside as well to try and help with some of the experience that I've had over the years with learning from the edges. But learning from the edges, as I did speak to in one of my earlier replies there in this conversation, it's a coach education framework to be embedded inside coach education for PGAs, that we actually get trainee coaches to understand that, if they're talking about hand position, hold, or grip, that, a basic example would be, well, what were the considerations you would take for somebody who doesn't have that grip strength, is missing digits, or doesn't have the ability to connect to the club as prescribed in a traditional PGA training program. So we've just enhanced that slightly and done that across around 11 different impairments and functions where PGAs and workforce providers can drop that in. And learning from the edges was required. We needed to develop that. And, we were quite lucky. We managed to get that over the line in a couple of years. And I say we've got it embedded in 12 PGAs. You're great that you host that. And we believe in the EDGA that education should be free. And if people do want to, it won't take them long to find it. So we want to be trying to lead on that and make sure that, so we can share some of that experience that we've had. And also some of the experience we've had in coach education, understanding what those workforce education providers, referring to the PGAs who train the professionals, would need as a sort of a content and the format of that to be able to drop that into their existing framework and develop their coaches. But we're hoping to grow that even further, as we develop with the 8 stage and we have more countries come on board and more professionals wanting to be trained. We're seeing a huge increase in that. I probably trained a lot more professionals and volunteers in 2025 than I've ever done. We've had a lot more hits on our online training globally, and that's across different platforms, including your own. So I think onwards and upwards with learning from the edges, but it is a good resource. I'm not just saying that because I wrote it, but it's nice for your kind words and very appreciative that you also share that. And that's what it was designed for. And hopefully we can continue. And we may revisit that and do a version 2 of that at some point as well.
Yeah, do y'all have anyone? I know previously we'd spoken about this, if I recall. Over here in the States, do you have any individuals yet that you've worked with directly that are kind of, taking your program and, developing coaches on any level yet?
Unfortunately, this isn't going to come across very well, is it? You are the only agent that hosts learning from the edges. As I say, probably as we get through this conversation, one of our next goals is to try and assist and provide resources in the other side of the pond over in the US and the Americas in generally. So we're working with the Latin America and South America as well to try and embed some of these principles into their coaching. But I do have some conversations with the LPGA. So hopefully, it won't be long before they have this embedded in their training program, hopefully in 2026. And that will get us get us to another 3,000 female coaches, which is also fantastic. You will be able to, better understand how people with disabilities can and could play.
No, actually, that sounded great to me. I appreciate the opportunity to say, hey, we might have been first on something. I don't know that. That's pretty good.
Yes. So hopefully we'll have a few more calls after this podcast to get a few more people involved. But as I say, we are at the show, so I think all things being equal, we should be able to, we just carry on doing what we're doing, Dave. And it's if people want to use our resources, they're pretty good. They're easy to transfer. They're easy to adapt. We don't want any credit for it. Then, for the most part, white label. All we want people to do is to make sure that, as an industry, we're providing those great moments and experiences for people who are playing the game with disability, or to encourage new people to play the game and share some of those fantastic benefits that it could offer them who are living with disability. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And that's the whole picture, really.
Yeah, well, we'll look forward to any opportunity we can to help you do that, whether it's with large organizations or individuals, because there's a whole lot of folks out there that don't know if they want to be in an organization yet, that are just getting into business, and they want to be coaching, they want to learn more about golf. And I think this is just a great way to get, honestly, more people interested in coaching even before they might even think that's a career they want to go down to a certain extent. Like, check this out. It's like, sometimes when you're in those formative years, you see something first time and something strikes a chord with you, and next thing you know, you've got a 25 or 30-year career doing it, right? And so we'll keep the pedal down with you as best as we can. So let's shift gears a little bit to an area that we're not directly involved in, except I guess maybe as a spectator, and because there's plenty of folks involved in this space right now, so we're happy just watching sometimes. But let's talk about competitions. Y'all have done an amazing job organizationally. You've got some fantastic relationships with DP World Tour. You created the G4D Tour. So just, I want to, I understand the structure a little bit, but for our audience, kind of help me better understand kind of what y'all got going on with these tournaments within tournaments, or same tournaments that involve golfers with disabilities with other golfers together or independently.
Yeah. I mean, the EDGA has been a catalyst for a lot of this. However, the G4D Tour, which I'll come on to in a second, is no longer our event. That's run and hosted quite correctly with the DP World Tour, but I'll talk about that in a second. But the EDGA as a whole, as it started, as we talked about at the start of this conversation, Dave, it started as an alternate pathway, a player pathway where players with disability could play in mainstream events at their clubs, but also have that second alternate pathway where they could compete with people sharing very often the same lived experience, and that social environment, which we know is so important, that socialization of people with disabilities, and that's where golf can be fantastic in delivering that. So the EDGA currently delivers, I think, around between 140 and 150 events worldwide that are EDGA badged. So they meet our criteria. There are EDGA Tour events now, EDGA Tour events, which are elevated events, which have a slightly more of an EDGA presence. That means they're actually run by EDGA staff as opposed to being run by the federation. So on the website, edgargolf.com, there is a tournament calendar. You can see the scope of the tournament team has, and the tournament team have done a fantastic job in educating these federations who now locally host their events. I think you have them in the US, and we also have a section of the world ranking for golfers with disability played in the US Adaptive Open, run by the USGA. So that's part of sort of the G4D Tour as well, because that's a high tariff event, and a very elevated event for the top golfers in the world. But what we're trying to do here is make sure that everybody has an opportunity to play. So there's competition and participation for everybody that plays the game. So the EDGA Tour and the EDGA events are run locally, and the G4D Tour, as you alluded to, well, that's sort of the pinnacle of the world rankings, which the EDGA also had a hand in developing and handed that over to WAGA, the World Amateur Golf Ranking. I think we put that together in 2019. I was part of that conversation. Sounds a long time ago, but the World Rankings has really been has given us opportunity to have these elevated events and give us an opportunity to allow the top players in the world not showcase, that's the wrong word, but to play at this competitive level inside these DP World Tour events with the top professionals in the world inside the ropes, playing the same tournament in the same week, very often the same weekend. Now we're starting to see that. And we've also now in the last 2 years, we started to introduce the net players as well to these events, just to give us a more diverse picture of how people play, not just the gross rank players, but also the net rank players. And this has brought a lot of female players to the events as well. So it really shows how diverse golf and how inclusive golf is. But I think the platform that's created, these people playing in that G4D tour are competitive. Some of them professional golfers who play golf for a living, full time. I think the opportunity of the world ranking has allowed them to create this stage and this platform. And of course, the commercial and media interest, which the DP World Tour gives those players, has allowed them to elevate their status and draw down sponsorship. So, although they're not our events, we did work alongside the DP World Tour in I think the first event around 2018, 2019, some co-sanctioned events where we had players playing a hole or two inside the DP World Tour, and you can see how quickly the organisation has developed that we've now been able to sort of remove ourselves from that really and let the DP World Tour run those events. And we're having between 7 and 8 events every year, and one of those events, of course, takes place your side as part of the G4D Tour calendar. Would be the US Adaptive Open, which is the US Open for adaptive golfers. We have the G4D Open, the Golf for the Disabled Open, which is the RNA's equivalent of the Open Championship for. So those two championships are also, very, very fantastic events to have those. The two governing bodies of the sport hosting those events is fantastic.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit later before we close about some recent European dominance in one particular event there. But that's a good segue into impairment categories. I think let's touch base on impairment categories, a term we use over here to a certain extent. There's lots of different categories, different organizations use them. Y'all have really standardized them in a big way to some level, but I guess it can be complicated maybe sometimes in the fact that organizations that have done this for a long, long time, they have their categories that they love, but as things evolve and change in competitions, things get revisited. So just maybe help us understand, impairment categories in sports classes, and kind of some of the similarities and then where there's some differences that still have to be worked out.
Yeah, so I think you touched on it there. I think, a lot of people around the world have been offering golf opportunities for people with disabilities, and they've identified their own eligibility criteria, as it may be. I was fortunate enough to work on the eligibility team for a couple of years. I'm unfortunately not able to do that anymore with my wider remit in coach education. But one thing I do know, and I'm lucky enough to still be involved in that in some of the research meetings that we have, is that the sports classes that you alluded to, what we've tried to do with the sports classes is basically simplify it. So you'll have those 9 sports classes, which they're 3 standing, 2 sitting, 2 intellectual, and 2 visual. I think when I went to school, Dave, that makes up the 9. So we have the nine sports classes, which are really, if you think about everything that the EDGA does, it has to have a player-facing side as well. So we haven't just tried to simplify it to make it easier for assessment process. And this is all in line with the IPC as well. Dr. Roger Hawkes has done a fantastic job with his previous work, and his previous connections in aligning all this and kept this where we needed it to try and give it that kind of standardization, as you alluded to. But I think the 9 sports classes do give the user, the player coming to the game, also a little bit more clarity. And also for somebody who's maybe observing golf for the disabled, it becomes a little bit easier to understand. It was a funny conversation. I was in Belgium last week, as I alluded to, as some coach education, and just thinking about that. I was doing some coach education around the industry and some specific coach education for functional training. And we had some different disability organizations in the room. And it was interesting that 81% of the disabled population in Belgium are non-visible disabilities. So that was quite a shock for me. And so just to get back on point here, I think the sports classes allow people to understand how people play. So the Lexi icons that have been developed to sort of align with the bigger Paralympic picture help people who maybe don't play the game but understand those functional differences that the individual may have, and they're very easy overseeable, and there's no language barrier in those. They're just icons, but the development of those alongside the sports classes will hopefully lead to making this all. We're not trying to standardize it. We're just trying to give some guidelines that will make it easier for everybody to follow. And that's a collective piece of work, not just the EDGA involved in that. There are other leading bodies involved in that to help us, develop that and come out hopefully with something that everybody can use.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it kind of feeds into a question I wanted to ask you about regarding golf and the Paralympics. Obviously, there's been an effort for a little while to have golf included in the Paralympics, and I know it was denied in 24 and 2028 for Paris and LA respectively. Do do you feel like these sports classes and things like that, and still the broad nature of them as it's whittling down to, again, standardization is a hard word, but as you get these, sports classes whittled down, is that the big challenge? And I really don't know. Is that kind of one of the main challenges right now with golf kind of not being there right now? It's a very competitive. There's a lot of sports and events trying to get in the Paralympics. Golf is one of them. I mean, there's a lot of that going on, but something's got to be worked on. I mean, it feels like to me that might be part of the ultimate solution. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's just a little bit above my pay grade. That's a slightly bigger political argument, but I could give you my sort of opinion on that, Dave. And you know, there's 9 billion people in the world, and 1% of that population play golf. There's 15 million people in the world, and it's 0.000 probably 1% of that population that play the game. The EDGA has never been really tied to the Paralympic bill. We just wanted to carry on with our organizational sort of mission statement, which is to try and get more people playing the game. That's part of it. And of course, I'm not poo-pooing that in any way. I think the Paralympics would be a fantastic opportunity to get this to, terrestrial households, billions of people worldwide, and demonstrate how good golf is. I mean, we've got golf in the Olympics. So, that's been a starting point as well. I think what we continue to do, I think the sports classes, everything that we do does hopefully have some benefit towards the future of maybe including golf in the Paralympics. But I still think there's a lot of obstacles in the way. I think one of the biggest things probably from my side would be, well, maybe behind that, if we look, we developed a world ranking, we developed a European Championship. These are all assets that would, not for any other reason, they weren't done for this reason, but they were done for the reason that was something that had credence and weight to it, and it also assists in the Paralympic applications. So you mentioned the world rankings, the whole reformation of the eligibility criteria, including sports classes, all works towards that. I think what would be the next step for golf for the disabled, and that isn't necessarily just the EDGA's role, that's all stakeholders involved, would be this World Championship, where we could sort of have a precursor of what the Paralympics could look like, because that would have all the bells and whistles around it, including, the sports classes, how we integrate that, the selection of players, that we have a team event, which is mixed gender, 2 men, 2 women, playing the game in a team format with points that are allocated. So we get a cross section of the functions and diversity. So I think that World Championship, which I'm sure is on the radar, would give us a slightly better leg up into the Paralympics, because we've already tried and tested it, which the EDGA does very well. It pilots a lot of things. I think everything else behind the scenes is going on. I know the IGF, International Golf Federation, That's their role to work on that as well. And I'm sure things are moving forward there. But to put that aside, it doesn't really prevent the EDGA from moving forward in what we're doing. We're still developing our tournament, still developing, increasing our player database. Over 5,000 users, not members, rather players. They're not EDGA players, but people have EDGA passes now, and that's growing. There's probably 3 or 4 new people registering for an EDGA pass daily. That shows the growth in the market, and all of these sort of big events that we're having in the G4D Tour and globally, I think will help. But I think that World Championship would just be a good stepping stone. But I hope that answers your question. That's really, from my side in coach education, the current position I am with it.
Perfectly, and I appreciate the candor there. I mean, it's way above my pay grade as well. It's more of a curiosity because to me, in the back of my mind, for that kind of event, uh, there's a depth of field issue right now. Okay, because again, when you talk about the number of golfers playing, how many golfers are there at an Olympic level, right? Whatever that level is, how many golfers are there at
You're so
that
right.
level?
You're
And
so right. Yeah.
there's so many different impairment categories. And I tell you, I think, when it comes to influence in the world, I mean, obviously, influencers is a huge, huge word out there, social media these days, all these golf influencers playing on YouTube and everywhere. And like I said, a fair share of them are phenomenal golfers, but there's a fair share of them that would not qualify for a PGA Tour, I guess is the best way to say it. But you think about, you mentioned your net competitions that you're working on and the team world golf thing, that concept or something like that, or even the USAGA just launched a net competition and a thing they're doing and some other stuff going on there. I think it's really cool because I think if you create the right event, even if it's a net competition, right? Because you've got a wide range of disabilities and skill levels, regardless of who's playing in a golf tournament. I think you got a real good chance of kind of moving the needle, and that PR value, as is super important to growing the game and bringing people into the game as you do and as our organization attempts to do. And so that feeds kind of right into, one of your campaigns you just recently launched about these golfers that are out there making a difference, and make it in their own personal lives and in many cases for others because of what they're doing. It's your You Can campaign, which when I caught that a week or so ago, I was like, that's really, really cool. Tell us about the You Can campaign, if you would, please.
Yeah, so the UCAN campaign was launched at our General Assembly about 3 weeks ago, Dave. So the media team and the EDGA media team and our marketing team have done a fantastic job with that, and that helps. I think what we're trying to do here is just give federation stakeholders an understanding that golf could be something that could be used in developing new players to the game, using that 15%, between 15 and 25% of the country's population may have disability and don't know about golf. So what we want to do is try and open that up using the players that we have. And if you're familiar, which I know you are, with the EDGA website, Ben Evans, our journalist, and his team have done a fantastic job of doing these player profiles, which actually speak to the benefits that these individuals who have had trauma and difficulties and golfers for most part, saved their lives and given them that chance, that second chance to go again. So I think what we're trying to do with UCAN is reach a wider population, because a lot of golf for the disabled stuff is servicing players who already play the game. And really, if we think about that, they're not really going anywhere. They're in the game for the right reasons. I've often talked about this in golf development in previous lives and jobs that I've had, is that the golfers, really, they may complain about the small stuff, but really they're embedded in the game for the correct reasons. So what we want to do with UCAN is try and use golf to get to a wider network of disability organizations and use the current players and the multi-diverse functions that we have inside those to to actually get somebody to say, well, I know somebody with a similar function to the world number one Kit Popert, for example, and I didn't think golf was a thing. So we've got this guy who's, a phenomenal golfer, winning everything. He's probably one of the best golfers I've ever seen, and I've been around golf a long time. And, this guy's untouchable. But he's got cerebral palsy, and yet you're going around Valderrama in 66, 67 shots, which is only a dream for me. But, he works really, really hard. But the purpose of the You Can campaign is to use these great stories of players, and we've got these media resources that federations and organizations can use, again, at no cost, to help them develop that introduction to the sport and help them to, bolster the industry with this diverse population that currently, are naysayers to golf. They think that golf isn't for them, but until they've tried it, they're going to remain like that. So that's the idea. And I think the You Can campaign, as we roll that out over 2026 and further, I think we should be able to get some metrics on that and the people that's brought to the game, which is probably its main positioning, really.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic, and I wish you the best of luck with it, success with it, rather, because I mean it's going to be successful. And it's we talk a little bit on a much smaller scale about with our work with golf course owners and operators about how to create environments at their golf facility that say, hey, we're open for business for everybody, right? We're open for business for everybody, regardless of your ability. And an imagery also often paints a really good picture, right? And so if a parent or a friend, a brother, sister, whatever, sees a golf course website, it pick a state, pick a country, pick a town, whatever, and there's maybe an image of a clinic going on there with a child or an adult that might have a visually apparent disability. That resonates. It says, okay, this is possible, and also this course is supporting these efforts. And hey, it's good for business, number one, because they're coming to the golf course, they're bringing their family and friends, and it's just not rocket science. And I think it's been some great PR coming out of the G4D events and some great PR coming out of Adaptive Opens. And I think it's really in a really good spot right now to really kind of move the needle and kickstart. Because like you, we don't run programs, but we are about bringing people into the game. They may not want to play competitions, and that's great if they don't someday. But there's going to be some that want to. But it's about getting out of the house onto the golf course. That's job one, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure you're probably reasonably
Yeah,
similarly
I think
thought
you're
about
right there, Dave. I think you're certainly right. I think what You Can is, I mean, I'm very fortunate to see the benefits and see those moments where golf brings a smile to somebody's face. I'm very fortunate to be in those positions where somebody says to me, or I'm maybe observing a coach that I've trained delivering that at an introductory level, is that I'd never thought it was for me, but I loved it. When can I do this again? That's why we do this. And to see those smiles on people's faces, very often we undersell golf. Golf is a fantastic sport for people with disability, limitations, impairments, functional diversity, however we want to reference that across the globe, because we have a stationary ball. It's a game that is inclusive by default. It requires very little to no modification to play the game, and the game can be played and enjoyed and consumed in smaller formats. And they can take place in any community-based facility. It doesn't have to be a traditional golf facility. And that's where we are developing a lot of our training resources, is to get to these people who are working with people with disability. And I think the health benefits, which are often talked about, but when we talk about this, 15 million people who aren't experiencing golf, the socialization, the getting outdoors, the green space, the fresh air, the ownership of the game, the stationary ball giving them time with whatever function they have to get ready and hit it, is something that other sports just can't offer. And I think golf needs to do a little bit better and sell that. And that's what we're trying to embed, is that, golf has this perception around it. It's elitist, it takes too long, it's not linked to the communities, and so on. It goes on and on and on. The list goes on and on and on. However, there is a parallel list to that which has a tremendous equal amount of benefits to everybody, and those benefits are probably more fitting for people who are, as you quite rightly alluded to, very often disability comes with isolation and loneliness and not being able to participate and not having access, or so getting golf on the menu of options for people with disability is a big passion of the EDGA, and that's certainly embedded in the coach education and what we try and deliver.
Yeah, again, really could not agree any more or less, of course, but very true. All right, so listen, great chatting with you today. We're gonna wrap it up here. I'm gonna uh, fire a couple rapid fire questions at you just for
Worry.
kicks like this. So if you're playing someone that's got a let's say a 2.0 or index or a handicap is 2 on the golf course, are you giving or taking strokes, and if so, how many?
I wish I could say I would be giving. When I was maybe 25 years ago, I would be giving shots to a two handicapper. And now at my age, and unfortunately, I don't get to play as much as I would like to. That being said, I have started playing a little bit more. But I think currently I would be taking probably 2 to 3 strokes off that two handicapper. Yeah.
All right.
So I'd be struggling to. I wish I could play to two, and maybe that's a goal for next year. But I turned professional off nearly just around scratch, which was pretty good 30 odd years ago. So I was quite happy with that. I just wish I could play to it now.
I'm sure the skill set is still in there. All right, so any predictions for the Ryder Cup at Adair Manor in 2027?
Oh, that's
I'm not going to suggest most of our audience is probably American, but go ahead with your answer.
I'll play it tactically. So I think if we could change the first 2 days, I think we have probably a better chance. I think the final day was very, very worrying, watching America make this unbelievable comeback. I mean, I watched it live and I was thinking, my goodness, we're going to struggle to win this after the first 2 days. So we continue with our first 2 days performance in the alternate shot and four ball better ball. But I think we have some serious work to do in our and hopefully Captain Luke Donald can. I don't want that job either, so I'm not going to talk too much around that. I think he does a fantastic job. But the singles. I mean, on home soil, Adair Manor, really nice golf course. Get the Irish crowd behind the Europeans. A few pints of Guinness, and I think we might have a bit of an edge with the crowd. But I couldn't call it, Dave. At the moment, I couldn't call it after the comeback that you made on day 3.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think it's always a good competition. I mean, I was on the bridge in at Medina. I think at the par 3, the bridge there. I think it was 17 and not 16, but where all Justin Rose, among others, started doing just a bunch of amazing things. And I was like, I'm on this bridge just watching it all fall apart, at the
Yeah.
end. But and
Maybe I need to go. I think I was managed to go to Italy where we won. Marco Simone. I was there on the Tuesday, and I was also prior to that in Ireland again for 2006, which you probably remember a long time ago, probably before most of the audience listening to this were even born. Would be at the K Club in Ireland where we managed to carve out a win as well. So maybe I should turn up at Adair Manor as a lucky mascot.
you might be the lucky charm. That's right. Well, one last rapid fire. And you've already kind of touched on it, but phenomenal golfer, Kip Popert. What do you think his win percentage will be in competitions he enters in 2026?
Well, Kip is a truly a fantastic player. I know his coach very well. And I've been very fortunate across those G40 events. I think I play and manage 3 of them this year in 25 and probably 3 or 4 last year. So I do get to see Kip. Very fortunate to get to see him play live at these events that the DP World Tour host. And, I've worked with a lot of good golfers in my time as a coach, and he is, as you quite rightly said, a phenomenal player. I think every time he teed it up, in 26 he won, and he won by some considerable margins. I'm not saying it is all about Kip, because the other gross players and other net players we have are fantastic golfers as well. I just think he has that slight edge at the moment. I see the players are working very hard to try and catch him, which is good. So I have a saying: you always run faster if you're being chased. So I think that's going to help the players, encourage them along, and I think he is fortunate that he can be a full time player, and he works very very hard on his game. And I think he was out at the early season with an injury, had some toe surgery. He had his toe fused, or both toes, I think it was. So he gave the players a little bit of a chance to have some free run at it. But hopefully in 26, I think we're also trying to develop some players in the world ranking from a coaching standpoint with some performance camps and so on, trying to strengthen that upper part of the pathway to try and develop some players who could give him a fair run. But he is pretty formidable at the moment, and let's hope the 26 somebody gets a little closer to him. That would be good.
Yeah, fair enough. I was up at Woodmont, and I was there that day where I'm like watching I forgot what score he turned with, but it was around 30, if not
Yeah,
29.
he was considerably under par in the US event.
Yeah.
I can't remember I think he finished about 12 under. I could be wrong with that, but it
Well,
was
I remember running out and working up a sweat, to get out there because I'm watching the scores and I'm going, this is like a legitimate 59 watch here, and I wanted to see it in person. So I'm up hauling across the daggum golf course, and just watch some amazing golf. But Mark, I really appreciate the time today. Any last words or updates that we haven't touched on today? I mean, obviously it's we could go on forever, but I know you've got things to do.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's been great to chat, and thank you for all the work you do over there. We're lucky enough to work together and align a few of our things, and we really appreciate everything that you do over in the US, and hopefully we'll get to see you in January at the show and keep developing. And if I can be of help to anybody, please forward them my details, and we'll try and pick up those conversations. But thanks for the chat; it's always great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I've enjoyed talking with you for sure. And if I may, I want to wrap up our conversation with an excerpt from Tony Bennett, if that's okay. I'm sure you've got some great quotes out there, but this was a
It's
good one.
better. It's much
This is most of them I could probably use, right? But this is a really good quote from EDGA president, who's been president, I think, since 2014. And we'll close with this from Tony Bennett. Our story has always been about people. We have never chased the spotlight, but we have worked and served with purpose, often behind the scenes, to build systems, share expertise, and then gift those assets to the wider game. And as you've talked about, Mark, that's what you've talked about today as far as what EDGA does, what you are heavily involved in. And the golf community and industry is really fortunate that you and EDGA are involved in this, and Dr. Bennett. And we'll look forward to talking with you soon and hopefully catching you down at the PGA show in January.
Thank you very much, Dave. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.